solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I so affirm.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Doctor, would you state your full name and spell your last name?
Thomas A. Andrew, A-N-D-R-E-W.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, doctor. Can you tell the jurors what type of doctor you are?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
Your Honor, if I may approach with
Yes, of course.
S49, Counselor.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Doctor, I'm now going to show you what has been marked S49 for identification purposes. And do you recognize that?
I do.
And can you tell the jurors what that is?
This is what appears to be the most recent iteration of my curriculum vitae, my qualifications.
And would that aid your testimony today?
Sure.
Now, doctor, can you tell us what your fellow is in?
I did a fellowship in forensic pathology after having completed a residency in anatomical pathology in a different institution.
And what about your fellow in pediatrics?
I went to medical school at the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then matched in a pediatrics residency program at Cincinnati Children's Medical Center. So I'm initially trained as, and I practiced as, a pediatrician in Cincinnati prior to changing directions and going back to the University of Cincinnati to do the residency in anatomical pathology and then the subsequent fellowship in forensic pathology.
And how long were you a pediatric doctor for?
I started my training in 1982, and I left for my anatomical pathology training in 1988. I continued to work as a pediatrician, moonlighting at the Children's Emergency Room and at an urgent care center in Cincinnati during the 3 years I did my anatomic pathology residency. But the last specifically pediatric work I did was in 91.
And where did you do your anatomic pathology residency at?
That was at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine from 88 to 91.
And can you tell the jurors about your fellow in forensic pathology?
After I completed my training in anatomical pathology, I applied for a forensic pathology fellowship, that's subspecialty training, with the Office of Chief Medical Examiner in New York City. I interviewed and got that position, and I did my fellowship there in 91, and then was invited to stay on staff as a city medical examiner for the city of New York, and I did that until early 97, and then was named acting deputy chief for Richmond County, which is one of the 5 boroughs. It's essentially Staten Island. So I was acting deputy chief for that particular borough until I left New York to assume the role of chief medical examiner for the state of New Hampshire.
And how long were you chief medical examiner for the state of New Hampshire?
20 years. I served from September of 97 and retired from state service in October of 2017.
Can you tell the jurors what board certifications you hold?
I'm boarded by the American Board of Pediatrics in Pediatrics and the American Board of Pathology in Anatomic Pathology and Forensic Pathology.
Can you tell the jurors about some of your academic appointments?
Well, when you're chief medical examiner or affiliated with the medical examiner's office, you get some automatic academic appointments. And when I was in New York, I had an appointment at SUNY and an appointment at Bellevue. But then when I went to New Hampshire, I had an appointment at the Dartmouth Medical College and also did teaching for the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences and a physician assistant program affiliated with Franklin Pierce University. I don't have any of those positions anymore because I retired. The only academic position I currently hold is as an adjunct professor of forensic pathology for the medical school at Boston University.
Are you currently a member of the New Hampshire Child Fatality Review Committee?
I'm currently not a member of that committee. However, I was for the 20 years that I served as chief medical examiner.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in court before?
Yes.
And about how many times have you testified?
It's in the low three figures.
And what types of cases have you testified in?
Well, in that my testimony has been exclusively in the area of forensic pathology, they have basically been involving issues regarding the interpretation of patterns and mechanisms of injury and cause and manner of death. These can be anything from natural deaths or accidental deaths, suicidal deaths, or homicidal deaths.
Have you ever been published in the area of pathology or pediatrics?
Yes.
And can you just give the jury some examples of those?
Well, most of my pediatric publications are in the area of child abuse and neglect and sudden unexpected infant death and the investigation of sudden unexpected death in infancy and childhood. I have other publications that are not necessarily germane to this proceeding, but other publications in various aspects of forensic pathology, gunshot wounds, drug deaths, that sort of thing.
And have you ever engaged in speaking engagements relating to those topics?
Yes.
And about how many autopsies would you say have you performed during the course of your career?
In the neighborhood of 6,000 or so.
And about how many pediatric autopsies have you performed during the course of your career?
I don't log those separately, but they're probably in the range of 500 or so.
Your Honor, the state is seeking to offer Dr. Andrew as an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
No objection. The court grants the state's application for Dr. Andrew to testify as an expert in the field of forensic pathology. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to give you that instruction again with respect to expert testimony. As I said to you with respect to prior experts, as a general rule, witnesses can only testify as to facts known by them. This rule ordinarily does not permit the opinion of a witness to be received as evidence. However, an exception to this rule exists in the case of an expert witness who may give his opinion as to any matter in which he is versed, which is material to the case. In legal terminology, an expert witness is a witness who has some specialized knowledge, skill, experience, or training that is not possessed by the ordinary juror, and who thus may be able to provide assistance to the jury in understanding the evidence presented and determining the facts in the case. In this case, the state has called Dr. Andrew as an expert in forensic pathology. You are not bound by such experts' opinions, but you should consider each opinion and give it the weight to which you deem it is entitled, whether that be great or slight, or you may reject it. In examining each opinion, you may consider the reasons given for it, if any, and you may also consider the qualifications and credibility of the expert. It is always within the special function of the jury to determine whether the facts on which the answer or testimony of an expert is based actually exist. The value or weight of the opinion of the expert is dependent upon, and no stronger than, the facts on which it is based. In other words, the probative value of the opinion will depend upon whether, from all the evidence in this case, you find that those facts are true. You may, in fact, determine from the evidence in this case that the facts that form the basis of the opinion are true, are not true, or are true in part only. And in light of such findings, you should decide what effect such determination has upon the weight to be given to the opinion of the expert. Your acceptance or rejection of the expert opinion will depend, therefore, to some extent on your finding as to the truth of the facts relied upon. The ultimate determination of whether or not the state has proven defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt is to be made only by the jury. As with all those charges, I'll again give you that charge in the final jury charge at the end of the case. Ms. Lento.
Thank you, Judge. Doctor, were you contacted by the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office in regard to the decedent, Corey Michelot?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors why you were contacted?
I received initial contact from the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office in September of 2021. They asked me to review material related to the death of Corey Michelot with an eye toward rendering an opinion as to cause and manner of death.
Now, doctor, did you prepare reports in regard to your findings and opinions regarding this matter?
I did.
Your Honor, if I may approach counsel?
Yes.
Thank you. If I may approach, doctor, I'm now showing you what has been marked S50, S51, and S52. Do you recognize those?
I do.
And can you tell the jurors what those are?
S51,
Are those your reports in this matter?
yes.
And would those reports aid in your testimony today?
Yes.
Now, did you perform the autopsy of Corey?
No.
Can you tell the jurors who performed the autopsy?
Dr. Ragasa, Dante, I believe is his first name, Dante Ragasa, of the Ocean County Medical Examiner's Office, performed the autopsy examination on Corey.
And when was the autopsy performed?
Autopsy was performed in April of 2021. Let me see what the specific date was. On the 3rd of April, 2021.
And did you review the autopsy report authored by Dr. Ragasa?
I did.
And what other materials did you review to formulate the basis for your opinions?
In addition to the autopsy report, I saw the images that were generated in association with the autopsy. And I examined the histological slides, and we'll talk about those momentarily. The slides that you look at under the microscope. So I looked at that. And then I had medical records from 3 different hospital facilities. I believe it's County Medical Center and Jersey Shore Medical Center and South Ocean. I saw medical records from Ivy Pediatrics, which were Corey's pediatric care provider. Certainly I saw police documentation, law enforcement documentation. I saw some telephone records. I had access to a video of Corey on a treadmill. And subsequent to issuing my first report, I received additional materials. I did receive an expert report from an infectious disease specialist, Dr. Feingold, and a report from a defense pathologist expert, Dr. Bodden.
Did you also review video from April 2nd of 2021 from the decedent's mother's phone occurring around 9 a.m.?
Indeed, I did, yes.
And you also reviewed autopsy photos?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion, after you reviewed all of this material, in regard to the decedent's cause of death?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what that opinion is?
I'm simply going to quote from my report, because it's a mouthful, and we'll break it down. But Corey died of blunt impact injuries of the chest and abdomen, with laceration of the heart, left pulmonary contusion, and laceration and contusion of the liver.
And can you explain to the jurors, when you say cause of death, what does that mean?
Cause of death is, it sounds simple enough, but it's something that's very specific. Cause of death is the disease or injury or combination of those things that initiates what's ultimately a lethal train of events, and without which death would not have occurred. So there are many, many, many causes of death.
And what about blunt force trauma? Can you explain to the jurors what that means?
In forensic pathology, there are various kinds of external forces that can act on the body. There could be penetrating trauma, such as that from gunshot wounds or stab wounds, or there can be blunt impact injury. And in that situation, you have force applied to the body over a much broader area than a single bullet or blade would cause. That blunt impact could be a small area or a large area, but it produces a different kind of injury than penetrating trauma does. And the kinds of injuries associated with blunt impact include contusions or bruising of the skin or internal organs, lacerations, tearing of tissue because of the result of the blunt force applied to it, or fracture of bone.
And what affects blunt force trauma and the impact on the body?
Well, the impact can be anything from minor to life-threatening. If you get up in the middle of the night in a strange hotel room and hit your shin against a nightstand, that may raise a contusion. But all that is bleeding under the surface of the skin, and that will resolve over time, and that will be fine. If you were to fall against that nightstand, you might sustain a laceration of your scalp. That may require stitches, but likewise you would recover from that. If you sustain any of these kinds of blunt impact injuries with sufficient severity, it could conceivably bring about your death if they were severe enough.
After reviewing the materials in this case, did you formulate an opinion as to the decedent's manner of death?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors what your opinion is?
Corey's manner of death is homicide. While there are many, many, many causes of death, typically in forensic pathology, there are only 5 manners of death. And manner of death is simply a one-word description to explain how a death came about. And those 5 are natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or in rare instances, undetermined. In Corey's case, in that these injuries could not have been inflicted by himself with any kind of intent, it's certainly not suicide. These injuries, given their pattern and distribution, are consistent with having been inflicted by another person. Therefore, any death that is related to the actions of another person is, from a medical examiner's standpoint, from an epidemiological or public health standpoint, homicide. Now, it doesn't have any legal significance, but that's the way that a medical examiner certifies it. So Corey's death was at the hands of another person, therefore it is a homicide.
Does a case histology impact the determination of manner of death?
Well, it can in certain instances. If you have a gunshot wound to the head with a perforation of the skull and brain, histology or examining tissue under the microscope doesn't add a whole lot. But in a case like this, certainly the examination of the tissues under the microscope was helpful in reaching my conclusions.
Did you make any findings regarding Corey's medical records from Southern Ocean Medical Center on April 2nd of 2021?
And I'm going to ask you to clarify that a little bit because I'm not entirely certain what the question is.
Did you review the medical records from Southern Ocean Medical Center on April 2nd of 2021?
Yes, I reviewed those records from April 2nd.
And can you tell the jurors if that helped to formulate your opinion as to cause and manner of death?
It did, yes.
And can you explain why?
Well, Corey presented to Southern Ocean at around 3 o'clock. At that point, he was already in serious medical condition. He was ashen, gray, in a shock-like state, and was fairly medically unstable. There was an attempt to make an assessment as to what might have been going on with him by doing a CT scan, and he got worse in the CT scanner to the point where he underwent a cardiac arrest.
And doctor, did you review any blood work from that hospital?
Yes.
And did that impact your conclusions?
Yes.
And what about any post-mortem CT scans?
He had a post-mortem CT scan. I don't find those of particular value, certainly compared to an autopsy, as to determining cause and manner of death. But I did see that there was a post-mortem CT scan, and I looked at its result.
Did you review the medical records from Jersey Shore Medical Center the evening of April 1st of 2021?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors about that?
Well, that particular visit was at the end of a sequence of events wherein Corey initially was seen by his pediatrician. There were some concerns about these bruises that Corey had as to whether or not this represented some mistreatment or child abuse. So Corey was referred to the emergency room, and I believe Corey and his mom went to one, but then they went to Jersey Shore after that. At that examination, he had a physical done, and they documented the various bruises that he had on different parts of his body, none of which were life-threatening. His clinical status at the time was perfectly stable. He was normal. He was conversational. He spoke with the doctor. He gave history. He made some disclosures. They also did some blood work and an x-ray of his chest, and all of that was completely normal.
Did you review the findings from Dr. Ragasa's autopsy performed on April 3rd of 2021?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors what Dr. Ragasa's findings were?
So Dr. Regasa received, the body was taken to the medical examiner's office, I believe, the night before, but Dr. Regasa performed his examination on the 3rd and documented all of the bruises or contusions that were on various aspects of Corey's body. Those were the primary external findings that he had. But an autopsy is a very detailed surgical examination of not only the external aspect of the body, but the internal aspect as well. There's a large Y-shaped incision made from the shoulders to the middle of the chest and down the center of the body, allowing the pathologist to take a systematic examination of each of the organ systems. It was during that internal examination that Dr. Regasa saw and documented several abnormalities. There was a large contusion of one of Corey's lungs, I believe it was the left lung. Examination of Corey's heart externally didn't show anything, but on the internal examination of the heart, after the heart was opened to reveal the chambers of the heart, a laceration or tear in the tissue was revealed near the apex or the tip of the heart, on the inside wall of the heart. Below the diaphragm is that flat muscle that divides your chest organs from your abdominal organs. Below the diaphragm, on the right side where the liver lives, there were two injuries that he documented. There was a laceration or tear in the liver tissue on the right edge, the right lateral aspect of the liver, and there was also a contusion or bleeding underneath the capsule of the liver on the front edge of the liver. There was a small amount of free blood in the floor of the pelvis, undoubtedly associated with the liver laceration.
Now, doctor, did you review slides which were prepared in conjunction with the autopsy?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jurors what the slides are?
This was what I was referring to when I used that term histological. These are not slides like old 35 millimeter photographic slides. This is something different. During the internal part of the examination in an autopsy, small tissue samples of areas that look normal or abnormal can be taken, and then they are processed by a laboratory such that they're cut in very, very thin slices and floated onto a glass slide. That tissue is then stained with specific kinds of stains that allow the pathologist to then see the cells under the microscope. So I did see the entire set of histological slides that Dr. Ragasa had prepared in conjunction with his autopsy.
Did you also review autopsy images?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors specifically what image 151 depicted?
Image 151 was of a pulmonary contusion, meaning a blunt injury of the lung associated with bleeding. Now, there was a picture of it. It's obviously that you can see. It's obvious that you can see it. It does not appear in his narrative description, but it's depicted in the photographs.
And can you tell the jury about image 153?
Well, I'll have to refer to my report on
Yes,
that.
doctor, if you could.
Oh, 153 was a picture of the free blood that was in the pelvis.
Can you tell the jurors about images 163 through 170, please?
Those were various views from different angles of the liver injuries.
And what about images 172 through 178?
Those depicted injuries in different parts of the body. 172 to 75 were hemorrhage in the retroperitoneal tissue. Sorry about the jargon, but I mean that's where it was. What is that? The abdomen is lined by a lining called peritoneum. Retroperitoneum means bleeding underneath the peritoneum, and this was toward the back of where the backbone is. 76 to 78 was similarly hemorrhage. It was contusion, and it was in the area of his left ninth rib. That may well be what was associated. That trauma on that side may well be what was associated with the contusion of the lung itself on that side. And then, yes, so that takes us up to 178.
Okay, doctor. And did you review images 196 through 200?
Yes.
And can you tell us about those?
These images were, I should preface this. I explained when I was talking about when an autopsy is approached in general, how you do that incision in the front. In cases where it is important to do, the death of somebody in police custody, for example, or in this case, a potential child abuse case, you do a similar examination of the back. So you turn the body over, and an incision is made along the midline of the back, and that skin is reflected so that you can see the muscles of the back. These images, 96 to 200, or excuse me, 196 to 200, depicted soft tissue hemorrhage or contusions along the spine or the backbone that you could not see necessarily on the surface of the skin. There were certainly contusions on Corey's back, but there were also contusions that did not correlate with, deep contusions that didn't correlate with contusions that were on the skin.
Can you tell the jurors about the myocardial laceration depicted in image 0205?
Yes, and this is complicated. So you all remember from high school biology, right? The heart has these 4 chambers, the 2 upper chambers and the 2 lower chambers. On looking at Corey's heart from the outside, all that could be seen was an epicardial contusion on the front of the heart. The epicardium is just the lining of the outside of the heart. So he has a visible contusion on the outside of the heart. But it wasn't until the heart was opened in such a way that you could see inside each of the chambers that this laceration was revealed. On the left ventricle, which is the lower left chamber of the heart, that's the muscular one, that's the one that pumps blood out to the rest of the body. There was a tear in the tissue. Dr. Agasa described it as about 1.5 inches, and that comports with the photograph. A horizontally oriented tear near the tip or apex of the heart into the muscle. It didn't go all the way through the heart wall. It was just a tear of the heart muscle in the internal surface of the left ventricle.
Doctor, did you review images 206 to 220?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors about that?
This was a series of images of scalp contusions. Corey didn't have a lot to see externally. On the scalp, there was maybe one abrasion or contusion near an eyebrow. But when one looked at the skin, or underneath the skin, there was a contusion on the top of his head and a couple of contusions on the back side of his scalp that you couldn't see on the surface.
Doctor, did you make any findings regarding bruising on the decedent's body, which was significant in regard to your formulation of your opinion?
Well, in assessing the potential for child abuse, it's not so much that contusions are life-threatening in and of themselves, but it's the pattern and distribution of injuries and also the presence of injuries of varying ages that suggest that a child has been mistreated. And Corey had contusions over a wide area of his body of varying ages, from under his chin, his head, his trunk, his extremities. There was one fairly large one just on the left side of his chest that looked to be fairly large, and that had been previously assessed. And particularly the presence of contusions on the back without a pretty clear-cut explanation it's not diagnostic of abuse, but it's very suggestive of abuse, certainly given the company that it's keeping. So my concern was not so much with the severity of the bruising, but the pattern and distribution of the bruising as being suggestive of child abuse.
Doctor, did you make any findings regarding the decedent's liver?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury?
Well, as I said, there were 2 injuries. One of them was fairly minor. It was on the front edge of the liver, and it was a contusion. That's not particularly uncommon after CPR. But there was a second, more significant injury, and that was out on the right side, the right lateral edge of the liver. It was described as a superficial contusion, but the photos clearly show that it's a contusion that goes fairly deeply into the liver tissue itself. And under the microscope, this was not a super fresh injury, so this was not an injury that could be attributed to CPR. So those are the 2 findings involving the liver.
Doctor, were you able to formulate an opinion as to the time frame when these blunt force trauma injuries were inflicted?
Only in a general sense, giving a range of time. To dispense with the contusions first, many of them were sampled under the microscope, and many of them were pretty much all healed, or mostly healed. You could see something on the surface of the skin, but not much going on underneath it. So other than to say on my gross inspection of these bruises, they appeared to be of varying age, that's as far as my opinion regarding the bruising. The internal injuries, on the other hand, have a little more objective evidence to offer in terms of timing. And the basis for that is something called the inflammatory response. So what does that mean? When tissue is injured, there is a fairly predictable sequence of events that occurs in the body's attempt to repair itself. That's what inflammation is, or one type of inflammation. So that inflammatory process involves the appearance of certain kinds of repair cells to the area of injury at a fairly predictable time, within a fairly predictable time frame. So I examined both and I did not generate new slides. These were slides that were done at the time of the original autopsy. So slides of the heart injury and slides of the liver injury. And in both of those injuries, there was a fairly well-established acute inflammatory process there. Though the cells that make up the acute response are called, I've got to say it because they have a name, they're called polymorphonuclear leukocytes. Wow. Let's just call them polys. So polys are recruited to the scene within hours after an injury like this. The second wave of inflammatory cells are called mononuclear cells. Those were pretty rare. I only saw those here and there. After that, and those, take up to like 24 hours to get there. And then after 24 hours, you actually start to see some attempt to heal the tissue. Fibrins laid down, and you see other cells called fibroblasts. Those weren't present. All I was seeing was this acute inflammatory process that was fairly well established. And that was in both the heart and the liver. What does that mean? Well, that means that, in my opinion, these injuries occurred at roughly the same time, and their age could have been as recent as 4 hours, but as old as 12 hours prior to when Corey actually died at 5 p.m. on the 2nd. That was the finding based on the histology. Additional evidence that I saw fine-tuned that time frame a little tighter.
And doctor, can you tell us about the additional evidence that you saw to fine-tune that time frame?
So if you think about that time frame of 4 to 12 hours, that would have been from 5 a.m. the day before to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the 2nd. There was a video that was alluded to, and it wasn't an intentional video, and there were no people in the video. You could basically see that the phone was on a car seat or something. And Attorney Lento, have folks seen this video? Do they know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. So it appears as if the phone was like on a car seat or something. And it was represented to me that this was Corey's mother dropping him off for custodial care with his father. And they were having a conversation. Well, this was at about 9 o'clock. Corey was answering questions. He was conversational. He was normal. Audibly. So if that's at 9 o'clock, the period of time of injury from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock, in my mind, is eliminated. A person with these injuries is not going to be responding like Corey would in the car. So that puts us between 9 a.m. and approximately 1 p.m. I can't narrow it down any more specifically than that, but I am confident that that is the range of time in which Corey was injured.
Doctor, can you explain to the jury if there was any opinion or determination or findings that you made after review of the materials regarding blunt force trauma and CPR post-mortem?
Yes. I was specifically asked questions about that because I believe these were questions that were raised in the original autopsy report. In my opinion, given the age of these injuries, it is entirely incompatible with them having been produced by CPR, because they wouldn't have had this inflammatory response that takes hours to develop. Furthermore, I don't know anybody who does CPR on the right side of the chest. CPR is done on the front of the chest. And like I said, the anterior liver injuries, not uncommonly seen with CPR, but not an injury out on the side of the liver that goes deep into the tissue. And thirdly, I've seen a lot of CPR injuries, more in adults than kids. Adults are, they have a lot of CPR injuries because our ribs fracture much more easily. But I've seen a fair number of CPR-related injuries in pediatrics. I've never seen an endocardial or an internal laceration of the heart like this one. So in my mind, I'm quite confident that these injuries are not CPR-related.
So, doctor, you were able to determine that the injuries occurred while Corey was still alive because of the inflammation.
Oh, exactly, yes.
Did you make any findings regarding sepsis or infection?
Once again, that issue came up on the initial examination. And based not only on the autopsy findings, but my review of the medical records, there's zero, not one scintilla of evidence of sepsis or any other infectious process in Corey's autopsy.
Doctor, did you note any findings regarding stress cardiomyopathy regarding the decedent's heart?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors what stress cardiomyopathy is?
Cardiomyopathy. So cardio refers to the heart. Myo is muscle. And pathy is pathology. So this is some sort of abnormality of the heart muscle. As the name suggests, stress cardiomyopathy, it is an abnormality of heart muscle that's produced by chronic ongoing stress. It's not visible to the naked eye. It is seen under the microscope. There are well-described changes of individual heart muscle, changes in the color, changes in the way the innards of each cell look under the microscope, changes in the way that the nucleus, the nerve center of each cell looks. These findings were pretty widespread in areas of Corey's heart. Some of the findings that are associated with what's been called stress cardiomyopathy, which is in the literature, are associated with CPR because the heart is dying at that point, and some of these findings can be seen also in CPR, but the constellation of all of these findings and the distribution of them throughout the heart says to me that this is not related to CPR, but it's related to chronic, ongoing stress. So while Corey's immediate cause of death was the blunt impact injuries that he sustained the day that he died, the presence of stress cardiomyopathy suggests that there was ongoing physiological stress, most likely due to ongoing mistreatment or abuse.
We now have up on the screen S97. Can you please tell the jurors what that is?
That's a very small contusion. It looks like an abraded contusion, sort of a combination injury on Corey's forehead.
And is S97 a picture? Is S97 a photograph?
Yes, it's a digital image that was generated in conjunction with the autopsy.
Okay. And can you just explain again what's depicted in S97 in the photograph?
Okay. Your Honor, may I stand? Is that possible? And do you have like
If he
a...
could come down from the witness stand, I think he's having a little hard. You want to come down from the witness stand or stand?
Well, I could point from here if you had a pointer.
I think we do, actually.
I don't know if it's going to work. No, they weren't working.
Pointer is not working,
Hold on.
so if you may
I'm a short
come
guy.
down or
Yeah,
it's
Red
working?
button.
Oh, okay, we're good.
I don't know if it'll work.
Your
on
Honor, just for
TV.
purposes of the record, we're handing the doctor the,
Understood. So the doctor is standing in a witness stand and trying to use a pointer to point to the large screen TV.
Sure. And this is a...
That's not going to show up from the screen.
That's not correct.
It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, doctor, if you'd like to just come down from the witness stand, if that's,
Is that good?
Yes, sir.
thank you.
So it looks like we're looking at the left side of Corey's neck. You see his hairline is here. This is just the outer edge of his eyebrow, the left side there. And that's Dr. Regas's thumb for the measuring device. So you can see a small abraded contusion that measures, no more than a half an inch, maybe 3/8 to a half an inch away.
Can we go to the next picture, please? Okay, and can you tell the jurors what S98, the photograph, depicts?
A contusion up behind the ear is, it really requires some sort of an explanation. That's an injury that at least raises, it's not diagnostic enough, but it raises the question of mistreatment of a child.
And why would that raise that?
Well, because it's a protected area. It's not normally injured like in a slip and fall or something. Now, if you fall against something, that it could conceivably, press your ear, hard enough against that bony part, the masculine process there. But most of the time, at least in my experience, it's generally associated with other injuries that suggest mistreatment.
Can we go to the next picture? Can you tell the jurors what is depicted in S99, the photograph?
Just to orient you as to where we're at anatomically, this is Corey's left shoulder. Right? Left side of his neck, left ear. So there's this linear contusion, sort of brownish, yellowish contusion up under his chin. You can also see this is pretty regular. I suspect this was some sort of EKG monitor pad. So that's not an injury. See how regular that is? It's got a little hole in it. So the main thing here is this contusion under his chin.
And what's significant about that?
Well, the significance of a contusion under the chin in and of itself is very little. But in the context of examining a child with multiple injuries of varying ages in different parts of the body, particularly up under the chin and around the neck area, once again raises the question of whether or not that child has been mistreated.
Can we please go to the next photograph? Doctor, I'm calling your attention to what has been moved into evidence, S101. Can you please explain what has been depicted in that photograph to the jury?
In S101, Corey has been rolled up onto his right shoulder. So this is Corey's left ear, back of his head, right shoulder, left shoulder. What is being emphasized in this image are two contusions. Now, in and of themselves, is a little ditzel of a contusion, a dangerous thing? No. But a contusion over the shoulder blade and sort of directly over the spine in a child without some sort of history of how that came about is not an area that you typically see injured in the run and play and slip and fall of childhood. It is the context, it is the pattern and the distribution that makes it an important finding.
Can we move to the next photograph, please? That is S100. Can you tell the jury what that depicts?
So Corey is laying once again on his side, and we're looking at the hip area. So the buttocks would be down there, the back would be up here. We're looking at a fairly broad abrasion. And we talked a lot about contusions, but abrasions are a different kind of blunt impact injury. If force is applied sort of tangentially or sweeping across the skin, it can raise the superficial layers of the skin up, raspberry, right? And that's the kind of injury that we're seeing here. This is an abrasion, rather large, confluent abrasion over his hip. Again, the context is what makes that important. That's not a lethal injury. It's not a life-threatening injury. But in the context of everything else that we're seeing, it's a significant injury.
Can we please move to the next photograph? S60, doctor, can you tell us what that depicts?
This depicts a contusion or a bruise that captured a lot of people's attention. So this is Corey's right shoulder, armpit area. There's the right nipple. There's the left. Just above it, there is this vaguely patterned contusion. It's partially healed. It's fairly large, and it's in a very odd place, unless there's a good explanation for it. It was valued by several care providers.
Can we move to the next photograph, please? Now we have S59, a photograph. Can you tell the jurors what that is a photograph of?
This is an internal photograph from the autopsy, the internal aspect of the autopsy. And it's a picture of the liver. And in specific, the outer right side, that lateral edge of the liver. So on the surface of the liver, what you see is this. There's a little bit of bleeding, and you can see that the tissue is torn. But Dr. Ragasa made an incision right in the middle of this injury to see what was underneath it. And you can see that all of this is abnormal. It should be uniformly this color. What you're seeing here is a fracturing or disruption or laceration of the liver tissue, and that comes when the liver tissue is compressed in some way. And as I said, CPR is performed in the front. It's not performed out here on the side.
Doctor, is that a significant injury?
It's not a life-threatening injury. As ugly as it is, it's not a life-threatening injury. Had Corey presented with this and nothing else, they would have probably seen it on the CT scanner, and they would have put him in the hospital and observed him to make sure that he did not have ongoing blood loss, and then discharged him with some physical restrictions, to let it heal on its own. So it's nasty, but it's not life-threatening.
Can we move to the next photo? Doctor, can you tell us what is depicted in S58, please?
This is likewise another internal photograph from the autopsy. In this instance, you're looking at the heart. Now, it doesn't look like any kind of a heart that you've ever seen before because it's been opened. So the heart has been opened to reveal the inner side or the inner surface of the left ventricle, the lower left chamber. What is seen here is an actual tear. In the this wall should be continuous. There's a tear on the internal surface of the heart near the septum. The septum is that muscular wall that divides the left from the right side. So he's got a partial thickness tear of the heart on the left, inside the left ventricle.
Now, doctor, can you tell the jurors about the severity of the tear and the relation to thickness?
This is a severe injury. This is an injury that triggered Corey's death. Why? Well, he didn't bleed to death. This laceration didn't go all the way through the heart muscle. It's not a hole in the heart. It's not a tear that goes through the heart. In that case, there would have been an enormous amount of blood loss very quickly, and he would have never survived as long as he did. In this instance, in that it was partial thickness, his heart could, at least for some hours, compensate for this injury. But I had mentioned the septum. The septum is where these specialized heart cells that control the rhythm of the heart live. So you've got these natural pacemakers on the upper part of the heart, and then they divide into fibers, specialized fibers that go down the septum. Disruption of this can trigger rhythm disturbances, arrhythmias of the heart. That's likely what happened to Corey in the CT scanner, why he went into cardiac arrest. With CPR, they were able to restore some sort of normal rhythm, but couldn't maintain it. He kept going into, I believe it was a rhythm called ventricular tachycardia, and they ultimately could not resuscitate him from that. So that's how this injury mediates his death. It's not, trauma, bleeding, exsanguination. This is trauma. The heart tries to compensate, the heart eventually decompensates, and he sustains a cardiac arrest due to his trauma.
Now, doctor, are you able to view the inflammation which you spoke about before in that photograph?
No. The inflammatory process is something that you see under the microscope. So Dr. Ragazza took samples, from other areas of the heart as well, but from in and around this tear, and that's where I saw the inflammation that allowed me to draw an opinion or come to an opinion as to the age of that injury.
Could we go to the next photo, please? Doctor, I'm now showing you, or it's up in the courtroom, what's been marked into evidence S152B. Can you tell the jurors what that is?
I received this image subsequent to my initial report, but I received it in conjunction with this question about timing. We already talked about the video at 9 o'clock. It has been represented to me, and I believe there's been some sort of analysis of the photograph that indicates it was taken, on or about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. To me, I mean, Corey could be sleeping, but it's certainly not inconsistent at all with him already having had sustained what were ultimately his fatal injuries. And he presents an hour later to the emergency room looking not much different than that, save for the fact that his vital signs were unstable and his color was ashy.
So, doctor, would that photograph be consistent with your opinion regarding the timing of the blunt force trauma injury?
Yes.
Can we move to the next photo, please? Oh, I think we are done. Okay, if you could go back to the witness stand. Thank you. Now, doctor, in conclusion, based upon everything that you have reviewed, what is your medical opinion regarding the cause and manner of death of Corey?
Corey Michelot died of blunt impact injury of the chest and abdomen with laceration of the heart, contusion of the left lung, and laceration and contusion of the liver. It's a traumatic cause. The manner of death is homicide. It was at the hands of another person. He didn't do it himself, and it didn't happen accidentally.
Thank you, doctor. No further questions.
Mr. Lucci.
Thank you, Judge. How are you, Doctor?
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. You been to Hanover lately?
I have been to Hanover fairly recently.
All right. Let's get to it.
Yes, sir.
Did you review all the police reports in this case?
I viewed police records. I cannot say for certain that I saw every single police report.
Do you
I saw
recall
some.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I saw some.
Did you review Detective Mitchell's 29-page synopsis of the case?
I did.
Okay. Did you review the records from Dr. Harry Larkin?
That name is not familiar to me.
Okay. Did you review the records from Southern Ocean Medical Center?
Yes, sir.
Did you see any records in there from Dr. Larkin?
I don't, that name, because I don't look for names, so I can't recognize the specific name.
Did you review Dr. Ragazza's medical examiner's report?
I did.
Did you review his findings?
I did.
Did you review the community medical center report?
Yes, sir.
And did you review Jersey Shore's medical report?
I did.
Did you review Southern Ocean Medical Center report?
Yes.
Did you review the grand jury minutes in the case?
Grand jury minutes. I'm going to refer to my report.
Yeah.
I don't see it listed on my initial report or any of my supplemental reports.
Okay. So you were hired by the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office sometime in September of 2021, right?
Correct.
Okay. And do you recall if that was prior to the medical examiner issuing his report?
No, I believe it was after.
So, are you still in New Hampshire?
I retired from state service in 2017. I maintain a consulting practice, and that is the role I'm playing here today.
Prior to reviewing the file and agreeing to become an expert, or maybe after you agreed to become an expert, did you have an opportunity to speak to Ms. Lento?
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to speak to Ms. Sean?
We communicated primarily via email. My primary discussions were either with Detective Mitchell or Attorney Lento.
So you did speak with Detective Mitchell also?
I did.
And when was the first time you spoke with Ms. Lento?
I don't recall specifically. I received the initial material for review, and we very likely had a conversation via telephone sometime between my receiving the material in late September and the issuance of my first report in February. So we undoubtedly talked one or more times in that interval.
And did you also, you said you spoke to Detective Mitchell, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember when you spoke to Detective Mitchell?
No, those were primarily conversations regarding transmittal of documents, timing, and scheduling of conferences with Attorney Lento.
So when you spoke with Detective Mitchell, and you've already testified that you read his 29-page report, Did you notice anything in there about one of the medical examiners from Ocean County County, from Dr. Harry Larkin?
This is starting to ring some bells.
Oh,
I believe Dr. Harry Larkin might have been the initial responder from the Ocean County Medical Examiner's Office, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
I will.
No doubt. I believe he is the one who ordered the postmortem CT scan on the body of Corey Michelow.
Now, and he's a medical examiner from Ocean County, right?
That's his title. I don't know what his credentials are, but that's his title.
And you were a medical examiner, right?
Yes, sir.
And the medical examiner is the one that actually physically does the work that you just testified about.
As far as autopsy goes, yes.
Right. So when you were a medical examiner, you were the one that did the slides, right?
I obtained the specimens. The laboratory generated the slides.
And you're the one that would open up the body.
Yes, sir.
You're the one that would remove the organs.
Yes.
You're the one that, as we saw, the liver was opened up, right? You're the one that would do that.
Yes, sir.
And would you also take those pictures, or somebody else would take the pictures?
Depends on the agency. In New Hampshire, I take my own pictures.
So Dr. Larkin ordered a CAT scan after Corey had passed.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes,
Now,
sir.
that's very unusual, right, for a medical examiner to order a CAT scan after somebody passed.
Again, that depends on the jurisdiction. Some offices, they're really like Baltimore, they're very well endowed. They have a CT scanner in their office. So for them, it's not unusual. I don't know what the standard is in Ocean County. I certainly don't routinely, or did not routinely do it in New Hampshire. So in New Hampshire, unusual. Baltimore, another day at the office, and everything in between.
So it was unusual then for Dr. Larkin to order a CAT scan in New Jersey.
I don't know what the standard is here. I don't know how often it's done.
But he also ordered blood work at that time, right?
That I don't recall. I recall the CT scan, and he certainly would have had access to the blood work that was already done in conjunction with the resuscitation effort. But I'm not aware of any additional lab work he ordered.
Are you aware of the blood work that was taken from the decedent after he had passed?
The only thing that I'm aware of that was taken post-mortem was the toxicology specimens that were taken in conjunction with the autopsy by Dr. Ragasa.
How about the blood work taken before he was deceased?
That would have been the blood work taken by Southern Ocean. Is it Southern Ocean?
It is Southern Ocean Medical Center.
During the resuscitation effort.
And are you aware that in that blood work there was a high white blood count, high glucose level, and high lactic acid?
Yes.
And Dr. Larkin found that was indicative of
Objection,
sepsis
Judge.
and infection.
Councilwoman Brooks?
Yes, please.
gentlemen, the objection is sustained. Mr. Galucci is going to rephrase the question.
Do you recall what Dr. Larkin's position was with the Ocean County Medical Examiner?
I just knew he had the title of medical examiner. I don't know his credentials or know what his specific role was.
Now, you reviewed a number of reports in order to come up with your conclusion, am I right?
Yes.
One of the reports you just testified that you reviewed was Detective Mitchell's investigation report.
Yes.
Did you rely somewhat on that report to make some of the conclusions you have here?
In terms of timelines and that sort of thing, yes.
So, did you ever go, you never went to Southern Ocean Medical Center, right?
Correct.
Okay. You never saw Corey, right?
Not physically, no.
You never ordered any of your own tests, right?
No.
You never ordered any of your own CAT scans, right?
No.
You just reviewed results of other people.
Yes.
And you relied on whatever they did to make your decision.
That's fair.
Okay. So, you did read the report where Southern Ocean Medical Center's CAT scan, you know what the result of that was?
Yes.
Okay. And the result of that was that there was an indication for extensive airspace disease in his upper lungs consistent with lung disease. And you did read that, right?
I read that, yes.
Okay. And you also read the x-rays. Did you see the x-ray reports from Southern Ocean Medical Center?
I remember the x-rays from Jersey, but I can't remember the specific wording of the x-ray reports from Southern Ocean.
Okay. So let's use Jersey Shore then. At Jersey Shore, you're aware that they yielded negative results for any injury.
Yes.
Did you review or go through any of Dr. Dante Ragassa's reports?
Yes.
Okay. So, Dr. Ragassa is actually the medical examiner in Ocean County. Or one of them, I guess.
One of them, certainly. He's the one who did the autopsy, the original autopsy on Corey.
So he's the one that did everything. He's the one that took Corey. He's the one that did the whole entire autopsy.
Yes.
Now, he reported on a number of injuries, just like you discussed, and he said that they were due to life-saving techniques.
Yes.
Okay. Are you disagreeing with that?
Yes.
Now, you're also disagreeing with the results of the CAT scan showing disease, lung disease?
I'm not disagreeing with what the CAT scan shows. The CAT scan shows what the CAT scan shows. My disagreement is in the interpretation of that CAT scan. This is a post-mortem CAT scan read by a clinical radiologist. Post-mortem CT scanning is occasionally used, but it takes special training to interpret the results of those postmortem CTs because they don't look the same in dead people as they do in living people. For example, the appearance of lung disease is simply a manifestation of blood no longer flowing through the lungs. Whatever blood is there, it's not moving, so blood is contrasted with air, so it looks like airspace disease. Furthermore, Corey had a well-demonstrated confluent contusion of his, I believe it was the left lower lobe. Now, the CT scan describes upper lobe stuff. But a contusion on a CT scan, these are lights and shadows. This isn't having it in your hand. A contusion on a CT scan would look like pneumonia. So my disagreement is not in what it shows. My disagreement is in what it means.
But you do disagree with Dr. Ragassa?
With regard to...
Life-saving.
Yes, these are not CPR injuries.
So, now, that's a contrarian view. You would agree with me? You go contrary to what the medical examiner here in Ocean County said.
No, I don't think it's a contrarian view. It is a second opinion, and as a matter of fact, was reviewed not only by Dr. Regassa's supervisor, Dr. Falzone, the chief medical examiner for the state, but was taken before a child fatality review committee. Dr. Regassa subsequently changed his report to reflect that this was a homicide.
And wasn't that after your report?
Yes.
So, the Ocean County Medical Examiner changed their report after you gave them your report.
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
So, do you recall a case that I believe you did medical examiner on called Patrick McCarthy?
Yes.
Patrick McCarthy, I believe, was a 10-year-old child.
Yes, he was.
And in that case, you were in fact the medical examiner.
Yes.
So you were the actual one that did all of the physical work.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And in that case, you said, as the medical examiner, it was not a murder.
I did.
Okay? 6 experts, including Dr. Bonin and the FBI, said it was a murder.
No, I don't believe that's true. There were experts that said it was homicide. Likewise, there were a number of experts who agreed with me. And it was my understanding that the FBI, save for one agent who was very, let's say, emotionally connected to the case, was insistent that it was a homicide. New Hampshire Fish and Game, New Hampshire Crime Scene Unit, New Hampshire Department of Justice, and the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor in New Hampshire, all agreed that indeed Patrick had died of hypothermia. Now, there is disagreement. I never changed my determination based on what others said because I did not find it credible. Nevertheless, the family has indeed, for I think it might be 20 years old now, has established a website that portrays me as Satan incarnate because I'm, quote, covering up a homicide. So yes, I don't think I'll ever forget that case.
Now, you kept using a word on direct exam where you would say, not a diagnostic value. What does that mean?
I think I was using that phrase in the context of some of these contusions. Like, taken individually, one contusion is not diagnostic of child abuse. Multiple contusions and varying stages of healing distributed over a suspicious area on the body is far more suggestive of inflicted injury than an individual bruise, which is not diagnostic.
So, are you saying that if Corey was struck on the right hip by a blunt force, that it would cause the laceration you see in the heart?
No.
Are you saying that the injury to the chest... By the way, how old, if you know, how old was that injury to the chest?
Which injury?
The one that's not the one that was due to the hospital, the one in the middle of his chest.
Oh, the bruise on it? Don't know.
Okay. Can you age bruising?
To some extent. It's not nearly as reliable as inflammation internally. There are some criteria to use for aging bruising, but it's not as reliable.
So if that bruise was caused 12 days prior by the treadmill, and between the treadmill, we know that he played football, he went to football practice, he was in his mother's care, he was in his father's care, he was in his grandparents' care, could that heart contusion have happened on March 20th and persisted all the way through April 2nd?
No.
We just saw a series of pictures of different injuries that you say that Corey received. Can you say with any degree of medical certainty whether any of those injuries that he sustained was what caused the injury to the heart and the liver?
None of the skin injuries, the contusions, can be correlated with what was seen internally.
Now, you also said that initially you put your opinion that it occurred between 4 and 12 hours, right?
Yes.
And then you changed your opinion based upon certain things that you were given afterwards, right?
Incorrect.
Okay.
I did not change my opinion. My opinion was amended or modified on the basis of new information. The basic opinion was still the same. The time frame was narrowed because of additional evidence that suggested that he couldn't have possibly have sustained those injuries prior to 9 o'clock.
So now when you met with Detective Mitchell and you met with Ms. Lento, did they discuss with you that if you put it between the 4 and 12-hour period, that he would have actually been in the care of his mother for some of that time?
Well, I knew that he did not get dropped off for custodial care to his father until 9 o'clock. So whether or not they mentioned it, I knew that that was the case.
So now you're stating that you saw a 33-second video of a child speaking to his mother. By the way, is that diagnostic or not diagnostic?
It certainly aids in the diagnosis. It is not diagnostic in and of itself. However, a child is not going to respond in that fashion if he or she has already sustained those ultimately lethal injuries.
So in the 33-second video, do you recall it, by the way?
I'm sorry.
Do you recall it?
The video?
Yeah,
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Do you recall that in the middle of that video you hear Corey moan?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay. Do you recall in the middle of that video you hear Corey yawn?
Yawn?
Yawn, like, ah.
I don't recall that.
Now, you also said that you saw a picture of Mr. Gregor that we just saw on the couch with Corey. And you said at that point that he could have been asleep. By the way, is that picture diagnostic value or non-diagnostic value?
It is of aid in reaching it is not diagnostic in and of itself. It's consistent with the time frame that I think this injury pattern occurred in.
So you're saying based upon a 33-second video and a picture and ancillary things to show you when that picture was taken and when that audio recording was done, that changed your whole opinion on the 4 to 12 hours?
No. It modulated or amended the opinion. These injuries were of fatal potential, and they would have been certainly responsible for a change in Corey's demeanor and behavior. Therefore, behaving normally at 9 o'clock precludes that portion of the original range of time. Therefore, the clock, if you will, must by necessity start at 9, but it certainly doesn't go beyond 1 o'clock.
So with that contusion to the heart that you showed us, by the way, I'm not a doctor, but let me show you it's been marked as states S. I'm assuming that's the heart.
You're on point.
Good. Thank you, Doctor. Can I hand you a Sharpie?
Sure.
Can you circle the contusion?
This is the...
That's evidence that the jury's going to be able to take into the jury room. I don't. Can you photocopy and have them do it if you want them to circle?
Thank you, Judge.
Sure.
I don't want to open the evidence, so.
Are we off the record while that's being done? Or?
Because I'm going to ask you to circle.
We're not on the record, we're on the record.
Okay, to be clear, it's not a contusion. It's a laceration.
I'm sorry.
It's a tear of the skin. I didn't know, just wanted the record clean.
Well, that's done. Can I ask you a question?
She'll only take a second, there's a copy machine right in the hallway,
All
so,
right.
or look at a piece of paper or something, toner or something like that. But, otherwise, under normal circumstances, you should be quick. What you can do is we'll mark it as S58A and S59A. You can show it to the doctor, you can hold them side by side if you want to mark up the paper photocopy. You can do that, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you, Judge. Oh, yeah. So, that's the liver, right?
This is the liver.
And that's the heart.
This is the heart.
Can you draw a circle with the marker where the laceration on the heart would be?
Your Honor, these are crap. You know, the thing is, I can make my best guess based on these images, but
Judge, how about we do this? Would it be all right if I handed him a Post-it, and he puts the Post-it on their exhibit as an indication of where the area of the laceration is?
What state's position?
Your Honor, I don't think that we should be marking evidence that's going into the jury room. That wasn't the purpose of it. It was an autopsy photo.
Well, the doctor went up to the TV
Yeah.
screen and he showed where
We could do that with the doctor as well, too. He could put the picture up if he would like. That would be different than actually documenting.
I think you look at the actual evidence. You can't compare the two of them together and point out where on the photocopy it is. I understand it's dark, but
it would only be a best guess.
if you can't answer, doctor, with a reasonable degree, then
I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay. How big was the laceration?
It was described as, and there's no scale on it, it was described by Dr. Ragas as being 1.5 inches in length.
Do you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it About 1.5 inches
It
deep?
certainly appears to be.
Okay. And how long would a person live with a laceration of that size?
It's not a matter of size. It's a matter of where it is and what it's doing. It's not going to cause blood loss because the heart's still intact, but it will disrupt the electrical activity of the heart, which can only be compensated for a limited period of time. In Corey's case, it was from the time he was injured till the time he was pronounced at 5 o'clock p.m. It's not going to be the same for every individual. Some people would die sooner. Some people may die after a longer period of time. It would certainly not be instantaneous.
So in Corey's case, you're saying that he could have lived for 4 hours with an 1.5 inch laceration to his heart.
Given where it is and what it is, yes.
And you're saying that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty.
I am.
Thank you, Doctor.
Any reader?
I do, Judge, thank you. Doctor, are you aware that Dr. Larkin is an investigator with the medical examiner's office?
I don't know who Dr. Larkin is. I know he's...
You don't have
I-
any information that he's the actual MA?
Right,
Oh.
right.
And it was actually a radiologist at SOCH who did the postmortem CT scan?
They read it, yes.
And why wouldn't you rely on a postmortem CT scan in regard to determining cause and manner of death?
A postmortem CT scan has to be interpreted in the context in which it's taken. In this context, it was simply a reflection of Corey having been deceased and did not aid in determining a cause or manner of death. Reliance on the CT scan to say he had pneumonia is utterly without scientific basis.
Now, do blunt force trauma injuries always leave bruising on the body?
Not always, and especially in the case of children who have fairly elastic qualities and plasticity to their skin. You can apply blunt impact injury over a broad enough area to transmit force inside the body and internally injure the body without leaving a contusion on the surface of the skin. That's not impossible.
And doctor, can you explain how that is possible?
It's possible because of the quality or the characteristics of the skin, particularly in pediatrics. Now, in a person who is not 6 but 66, different story. But pediatrics is unusual in that regard.
And does the force of the blunt force trauma have any impact?
It depends on the magnitude or the strength of the force. Obviously, a bump against an object is different than a blow that transmits enough force into the body to lacerate internal organs. So it depends on the magnitude of the force.
Did you make any findings, or were there any significant findings regarding Corey's toxicology results?
The only findings in Corey's toxicology results were medications that were given in conjunction with his attempted resuscitation. They gave him naloxone, which is an opiate
I'm going to object. It's outside my cross-examination. I didn't talk about toxicology.
He talked about blood work, Judge, that's why.
You did ask about blood work.
Yeah.
So it's allowed in that respect, overruled.
Thank you.
which is kind of routinely given in hospital circumstances and unresponsive people, given the ubiquity of opiates. But the rest of them were medications that were resuscitation related.
And can you tell the jurors who Dr. Falzone is?
Dr. Andrew Falzone is the chief medical examiner, or was at the time. I suspect he still is. Chief medical examiner of the state of New Jersey.
And did he review this case?
It's my understanding he did, yes.
And did he speak to Dr. Ragasa about that?
That's what has been represented to me, yes.
And after that, did the Ocean County Medical Examiner's Office determine that the cause of death and the manner of death is homicide?
That's my understanding.
Objection, Judge.
Judge, he cross-examined on it.
Well, you actually asked the same question.
Yeah.
Worded slightly differently, not the same result. It's overruled.
Thank you, Judge. No further questions.
Any requests?